Welcome to One Word Stories, today episode 26, and I'm very, very happy to host a very special guest, Charles-Louis de Maere, who actually is based next to one of the most beautiful towns I have seen in Belgium, next to Leuven or Louvain, depending on the language context you are talking about the town, with the beautiful town hall, with the beautiful old town and very, very picturesque corners. And when I think of the town and I think of Charles-Louis, I immediately have to think, of course, about this really beautiful, picturesque associations, because Charles-Louis in the first life, so to say, is above all a visual recorder, visual practitioner who works also for bikablo and offers workshops how to enjoy drawing. And during the lockdown, actually, we had the chance to meet in one of the workshops offered by Tiagi. Yep. And back then he shared that he is also working with stories. Of course, it made me immediately, delighted. And today we would like to talk about these ideas, how it's actually possible to work with stories in the intercultural context. So Charles-Louis, welcome, and just let us dive into the theme. What brought you to working with stories and how do you actually do it?
Thank you, Joanna. And thank you for this wonderful introduction. I was delighted by it. What brought me into stories, I would say that it was, as a kid, I had the chance of having parents that sometimes would get away and then we'd have a babysitter. And that babysitter had this huge book of grim fairy tales. And every time she came, it would be like one story and then you're going to bed. And we were always like bargaining to get one extra story if the story was too short and so on. So it was like, for me, a real treat to listen to all these stories and to grow up with that. There's still this love of stories and especially like fairy tales. And then a few years ago, actually in 2019, the year before the lockdown year, I went to an open space in London organized by a friend of mine, Tobias Mayer. So before going to London, in Brussels, I took the Eurostar and I went by a bookshop, an English bookshop, and I found this beautiful edition of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales.
Oh yeah, wonderful.
It's beautiful because it has many like very detailed illustrations, be it black and white or color. I don't know, can see it well. And when I went into the train, the first story that I read, and we talked about it as well in the workshop by Tiagi, was The Emperor's New Clothes. So like, I was sitting in the Eurostar, ready to go to London, and then I started reading this story. I don't know, I know that you're familiar with it, but I'm just going to tell it in a nutshell for those who might not be familiar with it. It's about this emperor that instead of putting money into armies or defending the country or things like that, he's just like mad about clothes. He spends all the money of the empire into clothes. And at some point, there's like two swindlers that know about this and go to the capital city, and they tell this emperor, "Oh, we've got this fantastic cloth, a magnificent cloth, which is the highest quality." And it has one specificality, which is that it is invisible to the people who are stupid or who can't do their jobs properly. So the emperor, of course, hearing that, says like, "Oh, that's interesting, because I'd love to know whether my ministers or the people around me do their work correctly or not." So he told the swindlers, "Hey, I need something with this cloth because this is like the most fantastic thing ever." Of course, the swindlers ask for a lot of money. They start working. They ask for money. They also ask for thread and golden thread, and also they start working, of course, doing nothing. And then after some point, the emperor wants to know, okay, where's this, how's this clothing going on? How's this work going on? And then he remembers that the clothing is invisible for those who can't do their job properly. And at that point, he starts to doubt himself. And then he said, if I go there and I don't see anything, everyone will know that I can't do my job. So I'd rather send my trusty old minister to see how it's going. Sends the minister, who enters the room and looks at the loom. Of course, sees nothing because there's nothing to see. But then the minister, knowing about the special property, asks himself, oh, I can't see anything, but no one must know. So he pretends he sees a magnificent cloth and says, oh, it's wonderful, and so on. And when he goes back to the emperor, he says, oh, the cloth is the most magnificent cloth ever seen, and so on. So he starts like telling this. A few days later, a second minister goes with the first one. They look at it together, and then they praise the beautiful cloth that they can't see. And the swindlers continue working, ask for extra money, and so on and so forth, until at some point the emperor says, I think now it's time that I go with my whole court and that we look at the cloth, because I've heard it's almost ready. So, everyone goes into that room. No one sees anything, but of course everyone praises it. And then when the emperor enters and notices he can't see anything, he's like, oh, everyone else but me can see this cloth. No one must know that I can't see it. Okay, so this is really the point where the emperor notices he can't see anything. And at that point, one of the ministers says, hey, we've got this great procession next week. Why don't you wear this magnificent cloth for the procession to go through the city? And of course, everyone says like, yeah, yeah. And the emperor said, okay. And the day of the procession comes, people start preparing, and the swindlers take this empty thing, pretend it's a cloth, and start dressing the emperor, who's of course totally naked. Everyone pretends there's something. They go into the city, and then everyone claims, wow, what a wonderful cloth. The emperor has the most beautiful clothes ever seen. And at that point, a little kid starts saying, but hey, why is this man totally naked? And at that point, the whole city starts saying, ooh, the emperor is naked, the emperor is naked. But this is not the end of the story. Actually, the end of the story is the emperor realizing that the kid is right, that there's no cloth, but that he's still in the middle of the procession, and that he carries it out through the end.
Mm.
So that's like the story. I think there's so many important bits in that story that I didn't shorten it too much. So I read that, and then I was like, okay, this is my whole life. This is my whole work life. People in organizations saying stuff that they can't see, pretending they know everything, pretending everything is okay, pretending. And I was like, okay, this is a story. It is old, but still it's so relevant today. So I was still in this Eurostar, going to London to an open space. And then I thought, as the open space started, what if we use this story to spark conversation and see, hey, you know what? Because I might see some parallels, but some others might see others.
Yeah, definitely.
So the open space started, and then I had like a small note where I said, and I don't know, I mean, you are familiar with the open space
Yeah,
technology.
sure.
Again,
I
I don't
run
know if,
them.
yeah, I don't know if everyone who watches this is familiar, but basically it's a
Yeah,
conference where
yeah,
the agenda is determined on the day itself.
exactly. Yeah. So everybody can propose whatever workshop or discussion
Exactly.
point, and yeah,
Yeah.
people follow.
Yeah. And so I had the book in my backpack, and I thought, shall I do it? Shall I not do it? And then ultimately I took the post-it and I wrote on the post-it the Emperor's New Clothes, and then I put it up there. And as the open space goes, other people propose sessions, and at some point the agenda is full. And then what I saw amazed me, because I wasn't totally sure. I was like suffering from the imposter syndrome, and I was like, maybe this Emperor's New Clothes thing
Mm,
is the thing, because I don't have anything tangible behind it.
yeah.
So that was really funny. And then people started moving it around so that they could attend. So I thought like, okay, there's no going back there. And I started, I think we were like 20, 30 people in the room. And I started reading the story, and then through some questions and like pairs or triad discussions, like it was really interesting to see, first of all, how quiet everyone was when I told the story. And secondly, how engaging the conversations were. I had trouble getting people back. I mean,
Mm.
I think it's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But I asked them, hey, when you read this story, how does this relate to your professional life?
Mm.
And then we have people telling me about this. Yeah, sometimes we ask to report on project's progress based on Excel sheets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And the project are green for 9 months, and then 1 week before the delivery, everything starts to become amber or red. And then it's like, it's interesting. And then I also ask questions like, hey, that's the easy question. When do you really, I mean, what part of your life were you the little kid?
Mm-hmm.
That's the easy question, because we're the hero. But then the other question I also asked was like, at what point in your life have you been like the minister,
Mm.
somebody sent out to sea,
Yeah.
and realizing you can't see anything and not wanting to look stupid?
Mm. Yeah.
And so, at the end of the session, people were telling me, Charlie, this was fantastic. This was
Mm.
like, hey, do you do 1 day workshops around this? And like, you should really do this. And again, I was really feeling like these swindlers. I have like, this is nothing. But I think this was still powerful, because there's this thing where, as a species, we've been telling stories for so long that we can't remember. I've just started there's a course on Coursera about the Canadian First Nations.
Mm-hmm.
And in the introductions, they talk about the different creation stories of these First Nations. And they share how important these stories are in the identity
Yeah.
of these nations. And I think in Europe as well, Europe has been for so long under some form of Christianity, that all these stories are still somewhere within, our value system, our organizational systems. So I think stories, they tap onto our emotional um, aspect, which means that we can relate to them very easily, much easier than if I were to tell you a whole theory concept of, imposter syndrome and things like that.
Of course, definitely, yes. And when you were telling also this fantastic fable, The Emperor's Clothes, I was also thinking, what are the limitations? What is the moment when actually you realize that you are investing in something that is not worth it, just like the emperor did?
Yeah.
And what has to happen that you stop,
Yeah.
that you don't do it any longer? Yeah. So this is also something that is really, really interesting, that with such fairy tales, we can, of course, as you have just emphasized, spark really interesting
Yeah.
and life-giving conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. Because what you mentioned there, it's the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
How many times have I worked on projects where at some point I said, it's getting nowhere. Shouldn't we stop? And then people look at me in the room as if I were like coming from another planet, and telling me, shall we, with the money we have already invested in it,
Yeah.
we can't stop now.
Mm, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and this is the sunk cost fallacy. It's like, but how much more money do you want to invest in that project? As a self-employed, it's critical to be critical of what I'm doing.
Mm,
Like, is it bringing enough uh, revenue? Because I'm a self-employed, so like, hey, at some point I need to feed my family. Is it worth it? Is it an investment? It's like, it's not just about the money, but is it like, is the investment worth it? What are my like test points? And what the emperor did, he sent different people checking whether it was okay. I wonder what would have happened if he had gone there
Mm.
himself. I'm sure that I have my blind spots as well.
Mm.
Um, and the interesting thing, you know, like, so you asked me how did I come into this storytelling, and I told you this story, but
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, then I ran some one day workshops, and like a few months, I think the last one I gave was in Lima, where I was invited by some very good friends from Navelab, Alexandra Oporto and Christian Harmson, and this was at the end of February 2020.
Oh, yeah, the last minute.
Yeah. So, you know, like we were planning this. Oh, wouldn't it be great if you did a storytelling workshop in Lima? I said, yeah, great. I've never been to Peru, and you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and so and then we find ways to make it work. And 1 week later, when I come back to Belgium, lockdown starts, and I'm
Mm.
like, okay, you know, I do loads of organizational work, I do loads of workshops, I do loads of things, but the world is different now. You know, this, we don't know for how long this will last. We don't know, and I saw lots of people who were like confused and lost, and I was confused and lost too. And then I thought, hey, you know, actually, I've got some friends in different places. Maybe I could just offer a free session of the Emperor's New Clothes. It's easy. LinkedIn, a post. Hey, people, would you be interested in a storytelling moment? And just see what happens. And I was surprised, actually, I had like more than 30 people signing up.
Mm.
And they joined, and I ran like a similar workshop, but I had more than 30 people signing up from all parts of the world.
Yeah,
We had
fantastic.
people from Asia. So, like, you know, from the Philippines. I had Brent from the Philippines. I had some people from India. I had some people from Europe, from the North and the South Americas. You know, and then you asked about this intercultural aspect, but sharing a story with people from different countries, different cultural backgrounds, you know, sharing the story listening moment, and then going into breakout rooms to talk about a specific subject, and listening to everyone based on their background, based on their, so actually it was like an intercultural workshop without the title of it.
Mm. Yeah, 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 I can imagine. Yeah,
It-
fantastic.
yeah.
Uh, Fantastic. You know, it was also this magic of these times, of course. And me too, I can share such a wonderful moment when I organized storytelling workshops, also with the focus on visual storytelling and working with fine arts. So combining fine arts also with very powerful questions from coaching and also working with participant stories. So not only fairy tales, not really fairy tales, but their own experiences. And it was also exactly what you have just described, you know, this wonderful dynamic of the group where it was 9 o'clock here in Europe and people joining from different European countries and from Africa, and then it was 5 o'clock in the morning for one participant from Chile, and 5 o'clock in the afternoon for one participant from Japan. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was also this wonderful moment when I said, "Hey, even if we don't call it intercultural, it
Mm.
is per se intercultural, and of course, people have got completely different insights, perspectives. They are eager to share." Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. And the beauty, yeah, they are eager to share. And you know, I think this, I don't believe in magic. There, I said it. However, there is magic when you put random people in a breakout room to talk about something specific based on a shared experience.
yeah,
People
yeah.
who don't know each other suddenly start to talk and to mingle. And like these storytelling events, I ran a few of them, and people became friends and
Mm,
got together for some virtual coffees without these stories needing to happen. You know, like they connected on LinkedIn, and then they had like regular talks. They went then to similar events. Hey, I'm going to this event, are you going to go to? So
yeah.
this is like, you know, yeah, it's this intercultural without it. I mean, you know, sometimes I wonder whether if we do a diversity and inclusion workshop, aren't we like, you know, by labeling it, aren't we also like kind of defeating the purpose of it?
Mm,
um it's like, what if it happened organically? And I know we're not there, and I know we need, of course, to do that, because some people are not even aware, that there are these issues. So it's not like I'm saying diversity and inclusion is not useful. However, I think that there's so many ways to introduce it without naming it in different workshops. So this is what I want to say. So I might be a bit clumsy with the wording. So what I really want to inspire everyone like watching us is like, what if you could introduce diversity and inclusion in any other workshop you do it without like having to label it like that?
Yeah.
you know what if you could just run a workshop and make it so that everyone on this planet could join if they decide to wake up at the right time?
Exactly, exactly. And what if, by the way, if we thought from the very beginning about the end, the outcome, and just planned these moments when people really have the possibility to share stories, to share their experiences, to talk about things
Mm.
that are important to them, and really to experience inclusion. Yeah,
Yeah,
where they see that every single voice counts. This is what inclusion is all about. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And based on that, there's this story in this book, like Slavonic fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a Serbian story in there that is called "The Maiden Who Was Wiser Than the King."
Mm-hmm.
And it's about a young woman that is kind of smart, and kind of, some people try to trick her, but she gets right down to the bottom of it. And at some point she goes to the court, and she's the only one who dares to speak the truth to the king. And like all the ministers are like, well, she's crazy, she shouldn't do that, but like she's the only one. And then the king, of course, respects that, and like it's the first time that somebody like challenges the king when the king says stupid things. So we had that workshop, and then it was really interesting also to share about different experiences and about different people who said like, wow, this story about a woman owning it up to a man, and like this being even the whole moral or behind the story is quite powerful. And we don't hear many stories like that in our um, regions. And so it's interesting. So this is also why I think it's important to be on the lookout for stories that come from different cultures than ours.
Definitely, definitely, yes. And when I listen to you, and also just this story about this wise young woman, I have to think immediately about Scheherazade. Yeah,
Ah, yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So also a different cultural setting, and a young, beautiful woman who risks her life actually to decide to marry the king, even though she knows that his wives don't live any longer than just one night.
Yeah.
And she decides to start to tell the story. So this is also the magic of the story. However, she doesn't tell it to the end. She doesn't tell it to the end. She makes him curious and makes him wait until the following night, when she actually tells the end of the story, starts a new one, and she goes on for 1001 nights.
Yeah.
Of course, with the result that he falls in love and they live happily ever after. So, this is also this one idea how we can actually work with stories, that we don't tell the story to the end, that we ask our participants what they think could
Mm.
happen next, or happened actually next. So that we also involve this emotional involvement, so to say, as a learning journey for them. And when they see that they give different answers, very, very often also rooted in their cultural backgrounds, and then, of course, it enables again the conversations about intercultural, not only differences, but similarities.
Yeah. And this is also fantastic. I love this idea of stopping somewhere in the story and then asking them, hey, what happens next? And then they can do it on their own, or even in breakout room, discuss different ideas, and then coming back. And one of the very a super, I mean, a great experiment that I also did with that So after having that, where they share the different possible endings, and then they see that actually everyone like has different understandings or different like outcomes, and then we talk about that. Then we tell the rest of the story, and then they can talk about okay what it actually means to them. We go back into the breakout. They share that. So like everyone has heard everyone's like summary or like
Mm-hmm.
main key takeaways from the story, and then the magic question again. I don't believe in magic, but you know to really highlight this intercultural, and intercultural and diversity is not only a thing about like skin color
Mm-hmm.
or age or gender.
Yeah.
So you ask this one question in one word: what is this story about?
Hmm.
And you ask everyone to type, but to wait until they press enter.
Yeah.
So you give enough time so that everyone can enter, and then you say, okay, everyone has written their word. Okay, great. Everyone press enter.
Yeah. So like a
And there's like,
waterfall.
yeah, and
Yeah.
there's like,
Hmm.
whoa, they're all different,
Mm-hmm.
and this is great because then again we can say, okay, how can we bring this back? We've spent all this time together. We've listened to the same stories. We've exchanged the same things, and still we view things differently.
And you have just mentioned this idea of the fall, or yes, and also
Yeah.
just one word that people take from the story, even how they would maybe give a title or what is this one word that was important to them. This brings me, of course, to the question: what was actually this magic word, this supportive word for you during this turbulent times?
Mm. So this important word for me that helped me keep some focus was relationships. I stayed in touch with many people. When I stayed in Lima, just like at the end of February, we had like my Peruvian friends, but there was also Antonio Itura from Chile, and then there was also Fred Madrigal from Costa Rica, and so we were like five together, spending a week together, and then we get back home, and then suddenly there's lockdown, and so we kind of stayed together. We had this WhatsApp group where we stayed in touch and sometimes got into calls. We did some activities or workshops together. I've also had many friends in different countries of the world, and we've like called each other. And so these relationships, and for instance, the fact that I went running a storytelling workshop in Lima just before lockdown, helped me trust the idea of putting a storytelling workshop out there in on LinkedIn. Kind of, yet without any plan.
Hmm.
This is being very honest and transparent to do is like, hey, let's just do it, and then seeing that people would come back, and then at some point they say, hey, you're doing this for free, it's all nice, but we'd love to retribute, to contribute to this, because at first I said like, this is a one-off,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people are losing their jobs, so
Yeah.
in
Hmm.
Belgium people can maybe pay something, but what about India and South America? I don't know.
Hmm.
So how do you price such an event?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, it's all about this thinking globally, and making sure that everyone can join. And so really staying in touch with these people, and connecting regularly also with friends and family. Yeah, we couldn't touch each other. However, like we have here, Joanna, it is possible to have a meaningful conversation through a screen. I always smile when people tell me, yeah, you can't have a real conversation like that. And by the way, I want to highlight, because I've also got some tremendous support from some huge friends. I mean, we were talking about Tiagi earlier. I had been on a workshop in Belgium with Tiagi in at the end of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Then I stayed in touch. I saw that he was doing stuff online, so I've been to many of his workshops, and I've had tremendous support from him, and also from Matthew Richter. Also, they've supported me also because I was just I was into my first. I started being self-employed in 2019, so it was still the beginning.
Yeah,
They've
yeah.
supported me in all that, giving me tips and tricks. I don't know if you've ever met Francis Laleman. He's fantastic. He's also doing loads of things in intercultural and storytelling and so on. We've been running workshops together. We're starting a train the trainer together as well. So it's like all these people that, as you say, they see the things that maybe we don't see, and like some people really pulling me forward.
So I know what you are talking about because I'm also a big, big fan of Tiagi and all his workshops and all his ideas. And I know there are plenty of inspirations worldwide. And actually, you have also said that you have still more books to share apart
Yeah.
from fairy tales. So,
Yeah, there's a very interesting one, which is called here the Writer's Map by I'm not sure how to pronounce this.
Hugh Louis
Hugh
Jones,
Lewis
I
Jones.
hope it's a good
Um,
pronunciation.
so it's about like fantasy maps, or maps that have been used to create stories. And one of the interesting things is, of course, I mean, you've got these maps like for Middle Earth and many of these like fantasy settings, and some um, some writers actually use existing maps to
Hmm.
draw then their own setting on top of it, so that they
Yeah,
can have like a real life basis
yeah,
to it. So
yeah.
this is like really bringing the fantasy idea into the real life. And I was actually inspired by this book, with all these wonderful maps that are quite
I
inspirational,
love it. Yeah.
um, to create my own map of what happened to me in 2020. So this is actually the trials of tribulations of me in 2020. An interesting thing is the year started with the continent of safe habits. I was working at my customer, doing loads of live in-person workshops. I traveled a lot because I told you relationships are important to me. So I'm like really loving to see people in person. I went to Peru, doing this live storytelling workshop, and then suddenly like lockdown starts and the pandemic hits, and I was like sucked into this whirlpool of doubt and inner critic. Like, hey,
Hmm.
what's going to happen now? Am I going to be able to do something? What's an organizational or a coach doing if they can't see the people? What kind of workshops can I do? And then I had like also this trap, which was the Leviathan of all encompassing focus, which is, of course, it's something that doesn't exist because you can't focus while being all encompassing. So it's about choosing what to focus on. And then I had like some the ocean of opportunities, like the Hôpital du Valais, that contacted me to work with them. They're based in Switzerland, I'm in Belgium, and they believed that we could do something together. I
Hmm.
started to run some experiments. So you see here Tiagi's Isle of Lolas.
Yeah.
I also did with Tobias Meyer. We experimented the workshop the Why of Scrum. Again, Isle of Friendships. Friendships, relationships, landmarks of untold stories. This is like a hint to the storytelling workshops that I run and so on. So with Francis Laleman, I learned to write in Sanskrit.
Mhm.
I did some Sanskrit workshops online, some crazy stuff that I never expected. And so I made this map at the end of 2020, and like adventures away. This is like 2021, and we're well into 2021, and I can say that I'm not regretting any minute of it. So
Fantastic.
yeah,
I love it. I love it. I especially love the Mount Ceviche.
yeah.
I'm getting hungry.
You know what that is.
Yes, I'm getting hungry when I see it.
Uh, yeah.
I have fantastic Peruvian friends who prepare it, and whenever, yes, we have got the chance, we also enjoy ceviche, pisco sour, and stuff like that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Charles-Louis, it sounds great. It sounds actually like magic. You say you don't believe in magic. There is magic in whatever you share about working with stories. And I'm very, very grateful for your stories, for your really amazing story, how you started in this field, for very hands-on oriented hints and yeah, tricks how to work with stories. And I wish you, of course, lots of wonderful projects.
Thank you, Jonah. Thank you for this great I was going to say interview, but it's not an interview. Thank you for this great conversation. I had lots of fun, and I really love this idea that you have of connecting with people around these one-word stories. I think that's really powerful. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much.